Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to cover Primoz Roglic. Of course I do, because he just got done winning the 2023 Giro d'Italia. And then you see in the Cycling News webpage channel that Jumbo-Visma and Primoz Roglic haven't denied that they won't be doing the Tour de France with Primoz Roglic. Looks like they say in the article that he'll be doing Tour of Swiss, which would be a good little warm-up race before you get into the Tour de France. Little tiny warm-up race. Tour of Swiss is a pretty hard race. I don't know if I'd want to be doing Tour of Swiss before Tour de France if I just finished the Giro. But if I'm Primoz Roglic and I just won the Giro, I would absolutely want to do the Tour de France in 2023 because Tadej Pogačar has broken his wrist at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So where exactly is the form of the Slovenian Tadej Pogačar? We don't know. At this point in time, if I'm Primoz Roglic and I just won the Giro d'Italia on the penultimate day in the individual time trial, so fantastically strong like we saw, over 40 seconds on Geraint Thomas, who finished second at the Giro d'Italia and second on that stage, you got to assume Primoz Roglic's form throughout the Giro had just been going up and up and up and up, whether if it was sickness or crashes, just health issues in general, or maybe not arriving at the Giro in top form so he can try to peak for that last week of the Giro, which is exactly what happened. Now, how it happened, I can't tell you. I wouldn't necessarily come into the Giro on not peak form. But if you were thinking before the Giro that, hey, I want to do the Giro and then I wanted to go do the Tour, maybe Primoz Roglic did come into the Giro just a little bit off. Maybe it wasn't health. Maybe it wasn't the crashes. Maybe he was just gradually bringing his form up. Maybe that's why Jumbo-Visma with Primoz Roglic were so careful throughout all the stages of the Giro, the early stages, and then explosive at the finish there as his form was coming up and up. I truly believe it was more sickness and more the crashes, but like I said, I'm not in the team, so I can't tell you for sure, so I got to cover all the bases up here on Beyond the Coverage. Now, let's say we get out of the Giro just like Primoz Roglic did by winning and coming with his form going up and up. If I'm Jumbo-Visma and the management team, I've already said that Primoz Roglic isn't doing the Tour de France, but he just got done winning the Giro. So if I'm Primoz Roglic and if Primoz Roglic comes to me as the director and says, hey, I want to do the Tour de France. I just got done winning the Giro. We all know my form's coming up. I want to go to the Tour and I want to do it. Now, if I'm the management, I say absolutely. Absolutely, 100% Primoz Roglic, if you want to focus on doing the Tour de France and keep that intensive training that you've had all the way building up to the Giro, and then you want to continue it to the Tour de France, I'm all in. Remember, if you just got done winning the Giro, he's going to get his first real break of the season. Remember, because he got done doing Trino Adriatico, and then he got done doing Catalonia. Then he went to altitude training camps, so he hasn't been home that much. But after the Giro, you can afford to take some easy 7 days, 8 days training, smooth and easy, and then you use the next 3 and 4 weeks to build up for the Tour de France. Probably 2.5 solid good weeks, then a little bit of taper before the Tour, a couple good days training, and then you come into the Tour de France on fantastic form, continuing with that brilliant form that he had on the last days of the Giro d'Italia. Now, why would you want to bring Primoz Roglic into the Tour? Well, first off, he's the number 2 best rider in the world and the only guy who can go head-to-head with Tadej Pogačar when they're both on top form. Some of you viewers are out there like, come on, Chris. Jonas Vingegaard won last year and he beat Tadej Pogačar. There's a lot of reasons to discuss why Tadej Pogačar lost last year's 2022 season, and it wasn't because Jonas Vingegaard outrode Tadej Pogačar. Tactically, they outrode him, but they didn't outride him in pure strength, and I'll break that down in later editions, so make sure you guys like and subscribe if you want to hear why Tadej Pogačar lost the Tour de France, and I'll bring that up clearly sometime before the Tour de France begins, because that'll be a big episode. But staying on focus here with Primoz Roglic, what are some of the benefits to bringing him to the Tour de France? Well, they're starting in the Basque Country, right? Stage 1 looks very difficult. Stage 2, they go up Jaskibel, and that's a hard climb. But Stage 1 is already going to be a difficult climb near the finish, and then a tiny little pop up to the finish there. So if you don't have guys that can beat Tadej Pogačar for the time bonuses, you need Primoz Roglic there so that he can battle against the other Slovenian and try to take time bonuses away from Tadej Pogačar. Remember, if we go back to Catalonia, remember that great battle that we saw with Remco Evenepoel and with Primoz Roglic, when Remco Evenepoel ended up finishing second to the Slovenian there, and he said, well, it's hard to beat Primoz Roglic when he's already in the driver's seat and he has a lead on me and all he has to do is defend, right? That was Remco Evenepoel words, not mine, but I agree with him 100%. It's easier to defend than it is to attack and take time away from riders. So if we go into stage 1, and already we see Primoz Roglic taking time bonuses away from Tadej Pogačar, that means now Jumbo-Visma just have to defend. Now, Jonas Vingegaard, solid rider. I believe he's top 4 rider in the world. I have Tadej Pogačar as number 1. Primoz Roglic is number 2. Then I put Remco Evenepoel as number 3 because of the way he can win the different one-day classics and monuments, world championships, grand tours. So I put him number 3. But if you wanted to argue for Tour de France sake with Jonas Vingegaard, I may flip-flop those two guys and have Jonas sit in 3rd. But at the moment, for my top 4 list, I have him as 4th. And then I have Wout van Aert as 5th so that we're clear up here on Beyond the Coverage. Now, when we get into the time bonuses, again we got Primoz Roglic. If he can take some time bonuses away from Tadej Pogačar and put Jumbo-Visma in the driver's seat going into the first big mountain stages, which this Tour de France is crazy littered with mountain stages. Even stage 2, they go up Jaskibel. It's about an 8-kilometer climb, and the last 3.5K of it is about 7%, and then you're dropping down the backside. Don't expect a massive battle on stage 2, but there could be a lot of guys that are threat for general classification attacking. And if Jumbo-Visma want to defend race leader Jonas Vingegaard, who won last year's Tour de France, when they're going up Jaskibel, they'll have to drive their whole team on the front. But that stage still looks pretty good for a Wout van Aert stage if he could come into the Tour de France with identical form to what he had last year. If he can't come in with the identical form he had last year, when they go up over the Jaskibel, Wout van Aert will not be there, which means you need a Primoz Roglic there so that he can take time bonuses away from a Tadej Pogačar. That is very, very important. Now, other reasons, aside from the time bonuses, to have Jonas Vingegaard and Primoz Roglic both there to battle Tadej Pogačar. Let's say Tadej Pogačar gets into one of these mountain stages, one of the many of them that are coming up, and right away when we're talking stage 5 up to Col de Mary Blanc, that's a steep, hard climb. So let's just say that Tadej Pogačar is on flying form. His wrist injury did nothing except for allow the Slovenian to rest and recover since the Spring Classics finished with Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Now he's on flying form. Let's say we get here in this stage 5 and he just lights this climb up. Well, you don't want a Tadej Pogačar going solo with Jonas Vingegaard back there chasing and let's say 4 or 5 other guys on his wheel that are holding on. You want Primoz Roglic there with Jonas Vingegaard, and those two riders could decide which rider's going to sell out for the other rider. Then they can pace. So when Tadej Pogačar throws in a big attack, gets a little bit of gap. This is all hypothetical. Let's say if he gets a little gap going up Col de Mary Blanc and he gets that gap, if you have a Primoz Roglic that can do a big effort that can close the first attack down by Tadej Pogačar, all of a sudden you're back on even par here because Tadej Pogačar has used some gas. Just like we saw on last year's 2022 edition on stage 11 going up the Col de Galibier when it was Tadej Pogačar attacking multiple times after getting countered attack. If you can have him attack and have your teammate pulling in front of you while you're getting the draft and your Jonas back there, once you bring him back after that first hit, all of a sudden the gas tank on Tadej Pogačar has dropped a little bit. Jonas Vingegaard saved a little bit. Now maybe they're even to do battle right away on that stage 5 later. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but at this moment, Tadej Pogačar is the #1 rider in the world, so it's not far-fetched to think on stage 5 that the Slovenian can just try to light everybody up on that climb once it gets into the real difficult last 3K of Col de Mary Blanc. So, if you have Primoz Roglic and he's on flying form, let's just say he's on the same form as he left the Giro, and let's pretend that, okay, you could do the Giro, but trying to win the Tour de France is difficult. It is difficult to win the Tour de France and back it up with 2 Grand Tour victories, but can you come into the first week, 2 weeks of the Tour and be on flying form where he can help Jonas Vingegaard? Absolutely. Could his form drop in the 3rd week? Well, that's what we all know, right? We all know the biggest thing about winning back-to-back Grand Tours, talking about the Giro and the Tour de France, is that the third week in the Tour de France, your form starts to drop because you can't hold 3 weeks from the Giro, 1 month in between the two races. You can hold maybe 1 week at the Tour, maybe 2 weeks, but can you hold 3? That's the big question. I believe there are riders out there that can, but it's rare. We don't really see it, right? You got to go back to Marco Pantani days to see somebody win the Giro and then win the Tour de France. It is the holy grail of bike racing to be able to win the double. The real holy grail would be to win the triple, but that's so far-fetched, it's not even talked about. So the real holy grail at this moment is the Giro and the Tour de France, because nobody even wants to link the Vuelta in there too, because we think it's impossible. But remember, Primož Roglic left the Giro on top form. We do believe a rider can come into the first week and the second week of the Tour de France on good form. We just don't normally see them go good in the third week. So if you could get 2 weeks, if Jonas Vingegaard could get 2 solid weeks out of Primož Roglic's form to help defend, to help attack or counterattack Tadej Pogacar's move, that's why you bring the Slovenian to the 2023 Tour de France, is for 2 weeks of racing. You don't even have to bring him if you're Jumbo-Visma to think, hey, Primož, we want you to win the Holy Grail. We want the Giro and we want the Tour de France. You don't even think that way. You think, give me 2 weeks. Primož, give me 2 solid weeks. And if we have the race leader's jersey with Jonas for the third, it would be nice if you stayed, but we appreciate the first 2 weeks. Remember, it worked last year in 2022, right? So why wouldn't it work this year in 2023 when the Slovenian's already on form? And remember, the big question, and he's asking to do the Tour de France, which means he's motivated and he wants to do it and he wants to be there. All that needs to be clear after that is, Primož, we need you solid for at least 2 weeks of the Tour de France to help Jonas Vingegaard win the Tour de France. And if something changes in the first 2 weeks and you become the race leader wearing the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, maybe we'll change the decision again, right? Remember at the Giro d'Italia, they changed 50% of their team 1 week before the Giro started, and they still end up winning the Giro. So you can change plans all the time. You can always hit the abort button or reshuffle things, and you can always change plans when you have a super strong team. Now remember, when we're talking about last year's 2022 Tour de France with Jumbo-Visma, it's a high expectation to ask 8 riders to show up at the Tour de France with the same kind of form they had at last year's Tour de France. So don't expect that. But can you expect Jonas Vingegaard to be on top form? Yes. Could you expect Primož Roglic to be solid for at least 2 weeks? We've all seen that done, and we know that's doable, but keep in mind, 2 weeks is the magic number that Jumbo-Visma would need out of Primož Roglic. If you get 3, that's even more money. If you get the Holy Grail with Primož Roglic winning the double, the Giro and the Tour de France, that's magical, and then we can talk about the untalked about Holy Grail of going to the Vuelta later after the Tour de France finishes. But that's a whole nother topic. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about and you're hearing the news and reading the news with Primož Roglic doing the Tour de France, that it would be a benefit to Jumbo-Visma, of course, to have him. So just show up, Primož, for 2 weeks is all the team Jumbo-Visma need, and it can change and alter all of the tactics that UAE Team Emirates and Tadej Pogacar would employ, and they might be having to be on the attack throughout the first 2 weeks of the Tour de France, instead of day one, winning some time bonuses on stage 1 or stage 2, and then you just have to defend, right? Primož Roglic doesn't show up. Tadej Pogacar takes some time bonuses, 10 seconds. Jonas Vingegaard, not a great sprinter. Before he knows it, he's 20, 30, 40 seconds down just from time bonuses, exactly like we saw at last year's Tour de France in 2022. And now it's Jonas Vingegaard that has to go on the attack left and right throughout the Tour de France, like Tadej Pogacar had to do from stage 11 onwards to the finish, which tired him out. So if Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglic don't combine to show up at the Tour de France for at least 2 weeks of the 2023 Tour, Jonas Vingegaard could be behind the 8 ball, and you don't want to be behind the 8 ball that's marked with Tadej Pogacar's name on it, because there's probably no way of coming back unless, of course, the Slovenian Tadej Pogacar makes some more knucklehead tactics along with all of his teammates and all of his directors that made those huge mistakes on last year's 2022 edition on stage 11. That was a tactical nightmare. So if they don't make those mistakes and he's ahead of Jonas Vingegaard, like Remco Evenepoel said at Catalonia, it's a whole lot harder to attack than it is to defend, and Jumbo-Visma are going to be in big-time problems. So, like and subscribe. I got more videos coming, of course, more details, more tactical knowledge, and of course, the bike racing is just beginning as we're building up to the Tour de France 2023. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.